We left off with Ichabod letting all the kids out early for school so he can go to a party. The gallant Ichabod now spent at least an extra half an hour getting ready, brushing and furbishing up his best, and indeed only, suit of rustic black, and arranging his locks by a bit of broken looking-glass that hung up in the schoolhouse, that he might make his appearance before his mistress in the true style of a cavalier. He borrowed a horse from the farmer with whom he was domiciled, a choleric old Dutchman by the name of Hans van Ripper, and thus gallantly mounted issued forth like a knight errant in the quest of adventures. But it is meet I should, in the true spirit of romantic story, give some account of the looks and equipments of my hero and his steed. The animal he bestrode was a broken-down plow horse that had outlived almost everything but his viciousness. He was gaunt and shagged, with a ewe-neck and a head like a hammer. His rusty mane and tail were tangled and knotted with burrs. One eye had lost its pupil and was glaring and spectral, but the other had the gleam of a genuine devil in it. Still, he must have had fire and metal in his day, if we may judge from the name he bore of Gunpowder. He had, in fact, been a favorite steed of his master's, the choleric Van Ripper, who was a furious rider and had infused, very probably, some of his own spirit into the animal. For old and broken down as he looked, there was more of the lurking devil in him than in any young filly in the country. Ichabod was a suitable figure for such a steed. He rode with short stirrups, which brought his knees nearly up to the pommel of his saddle. His sharp elbows stuck out like a grasshopper's. He carried his whip perpendicularly in his hand like a scepter, and his horse jogged on. The motion of his arms was not unlike the flapping of a pair of wings. A small wood hat rested on the top of his nose, where his scanty strip of forehead might be called, and the skirts of his black coat fluttered out almost to the horse's tail. Such was the appearance of Ichabod and his steed as they shambled out of the gates of Hans van Ripper, and it was altogether such an apparition as is seldom to be met in broad daylight. It was, as I have said, a fine autumnal day. The sky was clear and serene, and nature wore that rich and golden livery which we always associate with the idea of abundance. The forests had put on their sober brown and yellow, while some trees of the tenderer kind had been nipped by the frosts into brilliant dyes of orange, purple, and scarlet. Streaming files of wild ducks began to make their appearance high in the air. The bark of the squirrels might be heard from the grove of beech and hickory nuts, and the pensive whistle of the quail at intervals from the neighboring stubble fields. I love this time of year. The small birds were taking their farewell banquets in the fullness of their revelry. They fluttered, chirping and frolicking from bush to bush and tree to tree, capricious from the very profusion and variety around them. There was the honest cock-robin, the favorite game of stripling sportsmen, with its loud, querulous note, and the twittering blackbirds flying in the sable clouds, and the golden-winged woodpecker with its crimson crest, its broad black gorget, and splendid plumage, and the cedar bird with its red-tipped wings and yellow-tipped tail, and its little Montero cap of feathers, and the blue jay, that noisy cockcomb, with its gay light blue coat and white underclothes, screaming and chattering, nodding and bobbing and bowing and pretending to be on good terms with every songster of the grove. Bluebirds are so grumpy. As Ichabod jogged slowly on his way, his eyes ever open to every symptom of culinary abundance, ranged with delight over the treasures of the jolly autumn. On all sides We beheld vast stores of apples, some hanging in oppressive opulence on the trees, some gathered in baskets and barrel for the market, others heaped up rich piles of cider press. Further on, he beheld the great fields of Indian corn, with its golden ears peeping from their leafy coverts and holding out the promise of cakes and hasty pudding, and the yellow pumpkins lying beneath them, turning up their fair round bellies to the sun, and giving ample prospect of the most luxurious of pies. And anon he passed the fragrant buckwheat fields, breathing the odor of the beehive. And as he beheld them, soft anticipation stole over his mind of dainty slapjacks, well buttered and garnished with honey or treacle by the delicate little dimpled hand of Katrina Van Tassel. So he's really looking forward to eating. And thus filling his mind with many sweet thoughts and sugared suppositions, he journeyed along the sides of the range of hills which look out upon some of the goodliest scenes of the mighty Hudson. The sun gradually wheeled its broad disk down into the west. The wide bosom of the Tappan Zee laid motionless and glassy, excepting that here and there a gentle undulation waved and prolonged the blue shadow of the distant mountain. A few amber clouds floated in the sky, without a breath of air to move them. The horizon was a fine golden tint, changing gradually into a pure apple green, and from that into the deep blue of the mid-heaven. A slanting ray lingered on the woodsy crests of the precipices that overhung some of the river, giving greater depth to the dark gray and purple of their rocky sides. A sloop was loitering in the distance, dropping slowly down with the tide, her sail hanging uselessly against the mast, as the reflection of the sky gleamed along the still water, it seemed as if the vessel was suspended in the air. So, we'll see if Ichabod will meet up with the bullies on his way to this party, or what will happen to him on the way to see Katrina.